Hi there! Welcome to What is Islam Academy. Let's learn about Islam together.
Some claim that Prophet Muhammad simply copied the Qur'an from earlier scriptures, like the Torah or the Bible. But is this a historical fact or a shallow accusation? Let's investigate with logic, evidence, and clarity. Let's ask the obvious question. Was Prophet Muhammad a scholar, a historian, a priest? No, he was unlettered, could neither read nor write. The Qur'an itself states, "You did not recite any book before it, nor did you write it with your hand." Surah Al-Ankabut 29:48. If he couldn't read the Bible or Torah, how could he have copied them? Dr. Zakir Naik says, "You can't accuse someone of plagiarism when they don't even have access to the source material." Let's apply a simple test of logic. If the Qur'an was copied, then surely someone at that time could have exposed it, right? This wasn't a text revealed in a vacuum. It was delivered in 7th century Mecca, the epicenter of the Arabic language. The Arabs, and especially the tribe of Quraysh, were the undisputed masters of rhetoric and poetry. Eloquence was their highest art form. If the Prophet Muhammad had plagiarized even a single line, these linguistic connoisseurs would have been the first to detect it and discredit his entire mission. But what does history record? Even the Prophet's worst enemies in Mecca, the Quraysh, never accused him of plagiarism. This would have been the easiest way to defeat him. Instead, their accusations were born of desperation. They called him a sorcerer, a madman, a poet possessed. Why? Because they couldn't explain the mesmerizing power of the Qur'an's words. The chieftain Walid ibn al-Mughira, after hearing it, privately confessed, "By God there is a sweetness to his speech, it is exalted and nothing can be exalted above it." They were intellectually defeated, so they resorted to slander, tacitly admitting the Qur'an's otherworldly nature. Furthermore, consider the man himself. For 40 years he was known by the titles the Honest, Al-Amin, and the Truthful, As-Sadiq. His integrity was his identity. Is it logical that such a man would suddenly orchestrate the most elaborate lie in history? The Qur'an itself was unlike anything they had ever heard. Linguistically, it was neither prose nor poetry, but an inimitable literary form. Theologically, its uncompromising monotheism shattered their pantheon of idols, presenting a pure, consistent message. And then, the Qur'an delivered its ultimate testimony, a direct challenge. "And if you are in doubt about what we have sent down upon our servant, then produce a single chapter like it." This challenge was presented in stages, first a book, then 10 chapters, and finally, just one. The Arabs had every incentive to meet it. Their honor, religion, and power were at stake. Yet they chose boycotts, persecution, and war. They chose the sword over the pen, because they knew they could not win a literary battle. For 14 centuries, that challenge has remained unanswered. If the Qur'an was copied from the Bible, as some claim, then it should logically inherit the same theological framework. A copy reflects its original. However, when we examine the core theology, the very concept of God and his prophets, we find not a copy, but a profound and systematic correction. This isn't just a minor edit, it's a complete theological purification. Let's analyze the evidence. Consider the story of creation. The Bible, in Genesis 2:2, states that after creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days, God rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. The concept of rest implies a preceding effort and fatigue. It attributes a human-like limitation to the Almighty Creator. This raises a critical theological question. Does an all-powerful God get tired? Does the sustainer of the universe need to recover? The Qur'an addresses this directly and decisively. It affirms the 6-day creation but adds a crucial clarification in Surah Kaf, verse 38. "And we did certainly create the heavens and earth and what is between them in 6 days, and there touched us no weariness." The Arabic word used is lugub, which means fatigue or exhaustion. The Qur'an negates this concept entirely. If Prophet Muhammad was merely copying, why would he make such a bold and fundamental correction to a story accepted by millions? A plagiarist copies. He doesn't critique and refine the core theology of his source. Now, let's examine the portrayal of the very individuals chosen by God to guide humanity. The prophets. A prophet is meant to be a role model, a living example of the message he brings. Yet the Bible attributes grave sins to them. It describes Prophet David committing adultery with Bathsheba, and then orchestrating the murder of her husband. It speaks of Prophet Lot committing incest with his own daughters. It tells of Prophet Noah becoming drunk and lying uncovered in his tent, and Prophet Aaron, the brother of Moses, building the golden calf for idol worship. This presents a logical paradox. How can we be expected to follow the guidance of individuals who are themselves depicted as falling into such major moral failings? The Qur'an, in stark contrast, purifies the image of God's messengers. It defends their character and presents them as paragons of virtue and morality, protected by God from major sins, a concept known as Isma al-Anbiya. While acknowledging their humanity and minor errors in judgment, it upholds them as exemplary leaders. The Qur'an says in Surah Al-An'am, "Those are the ones whom Allah has guided, so from their guidance take an example." Why would an alleged copier from 7th century Arabia go against the established narratives and meticulously defend the honor of prophets revered by both Jews and Christians? This act of purification points not to plagiarism, but to a divine source restoring the dignity of its chosen messengers. Perhaps the most significant theological divergence concerns the very nature of God himself. The Bible contains passages that portray God in human-like form, a concept known as anthropomorphism. The most striking example is in Genesis chapter 32, where the prophet Jacob is described as physically wrestling with a man all night, who is later identified as God. Jacob even claims, "I have seen God face to face and my life is preserved." This depiction reduces the divine to a physical being who can be struggled with and even overcome by a human. It stands in direct opposition to the concept of an all-powerful, transcendent creator. The Quran's primary mission is to correct such misconceptions and establish the absolute, uncompromising oneness and uniqueness of God, or Tawheed. Its most definitive statement on the matter is in Surah Ash-Shura, verse 11, "There is nothing whatever like unto him." This short but profound verse demolishes any attempt to compare God to his creation. This message is reinforced throughout the Quran, most powerfully in Surah Al-Ikhlas, which declares God as the One, the Eternal, who neither begets nor is begotten, and to whom there is no equivalent. If Muhammad was learning from the people of the book, he would have been exposed to these anthropomorphic ideas. Why did he so radically reject them and instead champion a theology of pure abstract monotheism? This wasn't a popular opinion, it was a revolutionary correction. So the question must be asked again with greater force. If the Prophet Muhammad was a mere copier, why is his copy a theological purification of the original? Why did he not copy the errors, the idea of God needing rest, of prophets committing major sins, of God wrestling with a man? A human author, particularly an unlettered man in 7th century Arabia, could not have possessed the theological insight to perform such a systematic and consistent filtration of existing scriptures. He would have needed to be a master theologian of the highest order, with a clear, predefined doctrinal agenda. The evidence points to a different conclusion. The Quran is not a flawed copy, it is a divine critique. It acts as a guardian and a restorer of the pure original truth about God and his prophets. The consistent, pure, and rational theology presented by the Prophet Muhammad is one of the strongest intellectual proofs that his source was not human, but the same God who sent all prophets before him. Let's consider the historical reality. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived his entire life in Arabia, primarily in Mecca and Medina, not in the scholarly centers of Jerusalem, Rome, or Alexandria. He was known amongst his people as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. And he was also known to be unlettered. He could not read or write. This was the norm in 7th century Arabia, a society rooted in a powerful oral tradition, not a literary one. The vast majority of Arabs were polytheistic, and the intellectual environment was not one of theological debate or comparative religion. The claim that he copied from the Bible falls apart under basic scrutiny. The major Jewish and Christian populations, along with their libraries and scholars, were hundreds of miles away, across treacherous deserts. More importantly, there was no Arabic Bible. The complete Old and New Testaments were not translated into Arabic until centuries after the Prophet's time. The scriptures existed in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and Syriac, languages the Prophet did not know, so how could he have read them? Some then argue, perhaps he learned from Christians or Jews he met on his trade journeys. But historical records show these interactions were brief, public, and commercial. Are we to believe that in a few fleeting conversations in a bustling marketplace, he secretly received a comprehensive education on theology, law, history, and prophecy from multiple, disparate sources? And that he managed to do this for over 23 years without a single person, friend or foe, exposing this grand conspiracy? The very idea defies logic and human experience. Furthermore, the Quran's content is not a simple reproduction. It actively engages with, and often corrects, the narratives found in previous scriptures. It affirms the virgin birth of Jesus, peace be upon him, in greater detail than the New Testament, yet unequivocally rejects his divinity, the core of Christian doctrine. It clarifies the stories of prophets like Abraham, Moses, and Joseph, presenting a consistent monotheistic theology from beginning to end. This isn't the work of a plagiarist, it's the work of a corrector and a purifier, presenting a final, authoritative account. So what's the more reasonable explanation? That an illiterate man in a desert with no books and no teachers somehow masterminded the most elaborate literary and theological deception in human history? A deception so perfect that he produced a book of unparalleled linguistic beauty and flawless internal consistency? That he copied from corrupted scriptures he couldn't read, and in the process managed to fix their errors? Or is it more logical to conclude that the Qur'an was revealed by the same all-knowing creator who sent the original Torah to Moses and the gospel to Jesus, the one who knows the true stories and the original message? This brings to mind the powerful words of the great scholar Ahmed Deedat. He would challenge his opponents by saying, even if we were to assume for a moment that Muhammad had copied, he copied the best parts and corrected the rest, that would still make him a prophet of God. Because how could an unlettered man in the 7th century know which parts of previous scriptures were true and which had been altered by man? This ability to discern truth from falsehood is, in itself, a miracle. Don't allow your understanding to be clouded by recycled accusations that have been refuted for centuries. The evidence is overwhelming. We invite you to look at the facts for yourself. Study the Quran, examine its historical context, its linguistic miracle, and its transformative message. Discover its profound and undeniable uniqueness. The truth is waiting to be found.